Hey everybody, what is going on? This is Scott Garber and Andrew Petcash back in the saddle again with the Profluent Sport Podcast, where we are featuring thought leaders, founders, advisors across the whole sport landscape. Today we have a really fun and exciting conversation with the CEO of IMG, Brent Richard. It's not my story to tell, so we're going to dive right into it. A lot to unpack and uncover, but Brent, my man, welcome to the show. How we doing today?
Appreciate it, Scott. Those not watching, only listening, I want to make sure they know you're wearing the best IMG swag hat I've seen, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. It's we were just saying, it's easy to rep the brand when you give out good swag. So there's the first takeaway from the podcast. If your brand is giving it away, make sure it is quality, which is, sort of the through line of everything IMG is doing. It's quality from the education to the facilities to the humans. And, we're going to navigate the whole landscape because, you guys are really at the center of what's going on in youth sports. Brent, before we get going, though, man, it's always important to know the person at the helm, though. So why don't you give the listeners a little background as to who you are and, an abridged version of, your journey to get to IMG?
Yeah, sure. I grew up, I was an oil kid, bounced around a lot, but ended up in Texas. So I like to say I'm from Texas, went to high school. I was a soccer player, and soccer got me to college. I would have gotten to college. It got me to a better college than I would have otherwise been able to get to. And then transitioned that into, started my career at Goldman Sachs. Very fortunate to work with, amazing guy named Joe Ravitch, who ran the sports and entertainment group at Goldman. So very quickly got into the business of sport and realized that I liked it, and left with Joe. Tried to go start my own, a little known fact, youth sports business back in 2006, 2007, 8 timeframe, back when regional sports networks were the thing.
The good old RSNs.
Yeah, RSNs. I was convinced, in my home state of Texas, we needed a high school sports RSN. And about a month before I left Goldman to do that, Joe convinced me to leave Goldman to start what became the Raine Group. But I had an opportunity to be a founder, start a company, go from zero to something meaningful. Merchant banks, so I became an investor. Also where I got to know youth sports, started spending time in youth sports. And then along the way, I got to know Ari Emanuel. Mark Shapiro helped Ari buy IMG after Teddy Forsman passed away. IMG was far more than just IMG Academy, as I'm sure you and your listeners know, and got to be a part of a really fun journey with Ari and Mark, going from what was a kind of a good size, but just a Hollywood talent agency, into the kind of sports and entertainment, behemoth that EDR and TKO has, since become. And then 5 years ago, I raised my hand and just had a big pull back to youth sports, feel like very much back to my roots. Sports as a business is very much about entertaining people, which is great. It's a big business. It's a fun business. It's exciting. It's entertaining, but you're selling content. You're selling eyeballs. You're selling, butts and seats and tickets and sponsorships. There's something about the participatory side of sports, doing, acting, growing, that I just think is special. It's not as big, but it's special, and it's really connected to who I am. So I asked to go run a division. At the time, IMG Academy was a division of Endeavor. And so I've been at it for 5 years, thought I had a bit of a unique vision for it, a new flavor, way to grow, and focus and win for the customers. And here I am 5 years later. So that's the story.
Incredible. And Brent, it's pretty funny. I was watching some college hoops last night. They're talking about IMG guys coming in. And so you have this top talent pipeline. What was the state 5 years ago to where it is today and the evolution you've seen?
I think, like with a big, long history, like a 45-year arc, IMG started as really tennis. It was the Nick Bollettieri Academy. That's what it was. And Mark McCormack, a long time ago, bought IMG Academy when it was really tennis and a little bit of golf. And it was David Ledbetter in golf. And so it were these individual sports. It was a pathway really just for the most elite athletes. It was truly what the world would call a sports academy. It was sports, and then school was sort of next door. And the evolution over the last really 10 to 15 years, when we've integrated under one brand, we combine the sports with the school in one integrated offering, the mental performance, the leadership. The other thing that has happened is we've really brought on a number of these team sports. And so I don't know, my teams know the stats better than I do at this point, but I think 10 national championships in the last 5 years, right? For high school, there's 25,000 high schools in the United States. And so I think that's really special. It's unprecedented, certainly in the world of high school sports. But the truth is, what I think when people, talk to me about this, I always say it's great and we're proud of it. And I couldn't be more proud of that. But what's amazing about our basketball program is that we've got a team that is producing Zach Edey's, and national championships. But few people know that we have 13 basketball teams at IMG Academy. 13. So the truth of IMG Academy is it's actually less about those national championships. They're amazing. It's about the fact that there's something for everybody, no matter your level. It's about your dedication. It's about, do you want half-day school, half-day sport every single day, and to travel and the intensity and to be able to have it all in one place, the most elite athletes and really just aspiring athletes that want to have their best shot at playing in college.
Real quick, Brent, before we go too deep down the IMG line, I want to go back. In 2006, 7, 8, you had the idea of starting a youth sport business. Fast forward to where we're at now in 2025. As you look back at some of those wide-eyed, bushy-tail, ambitions you had, how has the youth sport landscape evolved? With you participating in a multitude of different ways over the last 15 years.
Some different, a lot the same.
Yeah.
It's funny in youth sports, there are these waves. Right now, we seem to be in one of these waves where there's a lot of, let's call it professional, business interest in the space, investor interest. Back in, and it's amazing how one or two groups or one or two transactions will create this flurry of interest and activity and conversation. And this, in my old world, the world of, private equity, there's just this FOMO, this pervasive FOMO in anything, not just in youth sports. So I think we're definitely in one of those phases. That I've seen one or two of those phases before, in youth sports. I do think, the difference is this time there are some real investable assets. If you think about the whole space of youth sports, there's probably not a single company that is like standalone IPOable yet. It says just add perspective, to it, just from a size and diversity and robustness, a handful. I think IMG could be on that path and a few others. There's probably, you could count on one hand the number of companies that have attracted what I call significant real private equity, interests, like the KKRs of the world and others. And then you have all of this activity that is, because it's so fragmented. So I think people see this opportunity when they see fragmentation, they see opportunity to create some unifying principles and therefore value. And I've seen people win trying to do it. I've seen a lot of people lose trying to do it. And, that's kind of how I see it. Yeah. And I don't mean to be that's maybe because I've been through a few of these cycles. I've just, I think we're kind of in one of these phases right now where people are very interested. And I do think there's some smart folks doing interesting things in the space.
No, it's super interesting to get that perspective. There's not many folks that have that tenure that are still participating in the sports, vertical. And so to go through one or two of those cycles, I think anybody listening, that's a nugget that they can take away, where it's just identify where we're at in the cycle. And now let's zoom in a little bit, right? Like when we think about IMG and taking advantage of this cycle, we came on campus, you guys are growing at scale, both on the education side, the admission side, and then new sports. Like give the listeners a little, bird's eye view into what's going on there on campus.
Well, I'd probably start with the brand. IMG Academy, first and foremost, is a brand. And the campus, the boarding school specifically, is the heartbeat. I always say it's the heartbeat of the brand. It's the product that people most know. It's certainly the engine. It's the genesis of everything. But it's also when people talk about IMG Academy, and sometimes with the word academy, and it can be a bit hard to get away from it. But the truth is, it'd be like saying that Apple's only the iPhone. And that's what I hear when people sort of immediately go to the campus. But the brand itself, IMG Academy, has four main products, which is the boarding school, the heartbeat, camps, which is not an education product. It's a sports camp product, destination based. And then we've got online coaching, so one-on-one as well as one-to-many coaching under IMG Academy Plus, and then college matriculation, college recruiting under a brand we operate called NCSA. So That suite of products is IMG Academy. We have a lot going on, across, the whole spectrum. But in general, I'd say my hope for IMG Academy is that, 5 years ago, it was really about 1,000 boarding school student athletes and this amazing brand that everybody in the world knew. I could fly to airports. I'd land in Dubai or land in London, or I've got stories hiking, multiple stories hiking in mountains, and people passing me with an IMG shirt saying, "You're not hiking fast enough to wear that shirt," kind of thing. So just this amazing, recognition. The opportunity was the boarding school could be even better. The value proposition for the customers, the experience of the customers, the holistic education, as well as there are a lot of sports we didn't have and still don't have on this campus. So we've added volleyball, we've added softball, we've now added a few more that I'll stop from announcing yet, but we've got a few more, on the come. So our boarding school, making it great for our families is always number one. And the opportunity with the brand and the resonance that boarding school creates, from my perspective, is to not limit it to only families who can physically send their kids to boarding school or will physically send their kids to boarding school or have already decided that they're this serious about sports. I think what we're teaching, I would say we can teach resilience. We teach resilience like most schools teach algebra, with real curriculum, and real coaching and real IP and real expert knowledge. We have child psychologists and sports psychologists on campus. They're not also the science teacher. So we've been trying to take some of that intellectual property and make it more available to more families all around the world. And so camps is great, although you still have to come to a destination. That's a week or 2 or 3 weeks. It's a way to get a piece of IMG without necessarily meaning you have to be at the boarding school level. And then digital, if we were 1,000 boarding school student athletes 5 years ago, we now have 150,000 families that are customers of ours. And the volume of that is very much thanks to digital. And so what we've seen is this tremendous resonance of our brand and our products when we could take the promise of IMG, which is development, and get me to that next place, which tends to be college. And we can provide great products to families. They want to engage with it. And so I hope that's millions. Like if you ask me what I hope that sooner my team would say, whatever the irrational date is for too soon, I'd like to be impacting millions of families. Because what we're doing in Bradenton is special and more families should have access to it. So we're trying to do that.
Now, Brent, you're talking about in Bradenton, you guys building this premier brand, but obviously as you build this elite infrastructure, right, it creates sort of a gap in the whole, we'll just call it prep school or boarding school market. How do you see the influx of other similar properties, like as that builds out, maybe as public education transforms? We have the Spires of the world coming up, which maybe you call competitors, maybe you call beneficial because now there's people on your level playing field. How do you view that whole landscape? Obviously big in the Northeast with all the prep schools. What does that space look like for you guys overall?
The benefit of being at IMG Academy is like the purpose is the purpose. We're empowering student athletes to win their future. If new money into the space or new opportunity, if there's more of that going on, and I believe sports with education provides the greatest holistic education experience you can have for life, not just for college. And so that's a good thing. If we're other people to find ways to do that, then we're good. It's all good. We're fine. IMG, this is great. We're going to be great. What I would say you worry about is what I'd say generally what I see happen, not just here in the States, international, as trips abroad. And you tend to see this dynamic where people want to say sports is sports or extracurricular. And they tend to say, when they say education, they really mean academics. And there's a little bit of this sort of, I don't want to call it blue collar, white collar, but a little sort of like, I don't want to call it highbrow, lowbrow, but just there's a division, here. So schools have, I think, increasingly taken on this position as sports more with a recreational kind of context, and they're really about academics. And then you've got the separate ecosystem over here that is really about the sports play, the club ecosystem, what's happening, with the exception being American football, really. And these things have kind of developed in these separate directions, in a way, when in truth, what I think so powerful about IMG Academy, and I think the opportunity is actually saying sports education is great education, period. Like I cross out the qualifier of sports. So what are we trying to get for our kids? Great holistic outcomes, leadership, overcoming failure. These life lessons that you learn on the field that can be combined with the classroom and can be taught and measured just like you do SAT scores. That's what's so special. And so I think that I just hope that we can actually try to bring these ideas together more as opposed to apart, because I just see that sometimes in education, they want to focus on academics and they say this kind of life skill lane that sports brings is extra. But when you take the sports out of the academic setting, they tend to just focus on the wins and the losses and the gameplay and sort of lose some of that pedagogical, like academic, sort of piece of the puzzle. And so I do think IMG occupies this very unique space globally, where we're quite literally physically doing both on the same campus, which is rare. But I think it's also just more the idea of it. What are we trying to accomplish? Yes, it's great that we have future NBA players and future NFL players, but 100% of our student athletes will go to college. They will probably get better college opportunities and options. And 100% of them will go on and they'll have a better platform for wherever they go in life. That's our main goal. It's not wins and losses. People always ask me, like, you didn't win a national championship this year. Does that bother you? No, it doesn't. Is it nice to have? Sure. My question is, do they all get to college? How are they doing? How are the student athletes doing? Are they prepared for this new moment with NIL in college? Are we doing our job, which is education? And so I just think that people in the sports side, I guess I would say I'd encourage on the academic side, think about sports as the holistic. What are we really trying to accomplish with our kids? This is a part of the puzzle. It's not a sideshow. And if you're more on the sports side, I would say think about yourself as education, not as sports. If you think about yourself as education as much as you are sports, you're going to win for the kids. It's the separation that I think is bothers me in the space.
It's so nice to point the arrow back to the end product, which is the kids. I think sometimes we get lost in that in the journey of all these bright, shiny objects. And at the end of the day, it's providing the best experience holistically for kids to shape the next generation of future leaders, of future CEs. And I think it's just so refreshing to be on this podcast, marrying those two in such a cohesive way. I'm curious, though, when we talk about bright, shiny objects, you just alluded to NIL, upstream in college, you guys do have the privilege of working with some elite athletes that then garner elite attention. Brent, I'm curious, how have you guys navigated the NIL sort of journey over the last couple of years? And, on campus, is it more promoted? Is it more of an individual endeavor? How do you guys think about that from an education lens to these athletes?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's fascinating, evolving. There's probably been more change in college sports in the last 4 years as there were the 40 preceding years. And the truth is, it's still the ground is not solid. No. It's evolving and moving, and so I just it is I'd say fascinating. If you're just sort of curious person and company, I think it's just an interesting time. For IMG, we've just drawn bright lines here, which is generally speaking the upshot of all of the moving parts. We could how will the settlement work? How will it get allocated? Who will get what? How will football versus others? There's all these what ifs out there. And there's people working hard to figure those things out. But the big upshot at the end of the day, the 50,000 foot view from my lens, our lens is, it just sort of generally means that the value of a roster spot is going up. It used to be just the pathway to get on a team was valuable, because it provided you an opportunity to have a one-to-one, like a recruited conversation. In a world where college admissions has gotten hard and the vast majority of the kids are just putting their name in with a transcript, with an SAT score and hoping, it's more of a relationship pathway. You're finding fit, you're being recruited. Imagine that college is recruiting students as opposed to, turning them down or accepting them. It's just that's a value. On top of that, there were the scholarships, and obviously for kids, just the opportunity for their parents to participate in this ecosystem that develop these skills that make them better candidates for, jobs after school. You hear time and time again, if you put student athlete next to any general applicant and they're anywhere close, student athlete's going to get the job. So there are always all of these soft benefits and the hard benefit of a scholarship. And now just on top of it, there's additional value There's NIL, which is its own stream, which is different flavors, collectives and direct brand deals. And there's going to be revenue sharing as well, which is for the first time going to be direct payments from the schools to the students. And so while that's all shifting and evolving, at the end of the day, when your customer and audience are the students in middle school and high school, what it really means is that the value proposition on the other end of this is going up. It also means for us, I have no interest in participating in the transactions. It's not what we do.
Yep.
If you're a sports agency or you're, and there's a lot of business, a lot of money of people trying to figure all of that out. It's not our job. It's not what we do. We educate. And we help them get into college and make the right progression. And so we've been really focused on our curriculum, right? So we had a really fun time ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange last year to announce a partnership with Merrill. One of the challenges we had a basketball player, and I forget the story, went up to an economics professor at IMG and said, "Hey, professor such and such, I'm graduating, and when I graduate this summer, I'm going to get $3 million. Question was, what do I do?" Just open-ended. It wasn't, what do I do? Literally. Think about all of us that went to college and then get a job and then start answering that question 5, 6, 7 years later on your maturity cycle and a college education. So now you've got high school athletes there's a need to educate. NIL, brand building. I always say to people, how are you going to make a decision about who you want to connect your personal brand to before you understand who you are, what you represent? Who do you want to be? Not what does some brand want you to be? And these are middle school and high school. I'm not going to call them kids, they're young adults, but these are not college graduates. And so there's just a whole ecosystem now for us. It's a lot of fun, actually, of what in this evolving world, what is our evolving education value proposition? And so that's where we spent most of our time, both on our campus and online, making sure that we're meeting this moment, providing the tools and the platform for these student athletes to succeed when they get to college. And the success in college looks a little different than it used to.
Yeah. And we go back to infrastructure, right? It's something we talk about here at Profluence a ton. And I think that education layer is the infrastructure that's setting these young adults up for short-term success, but also a long tail behind it where, this is just a moment in time in your journey. This isn't the destination. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of that, which is, it's so neat, again, just to hear these two worlds coming together and producing just as high a quality education as you are athletics. So I want to go ahead. I got one more question, and I think Andrew might have one more, and then we'll start to turn the corner and take this home. You mentioned volleyball, you mentioned softball. We're watching women's sports, start to really accelerate. I'm curious, how is your guys' relationship with some of the emerging leagues, the LOVBs, the unrivaled of the world? Are you guys working directly with them, or is that influencing, your roadmap of what sports you bring online? Just curious how you guys sort of think about that internally.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would just say I love the evolution focus on women's sports. There's always this conversation about if you give them the women's sports the appropriate airtime and tell the stories and build the storylines the way we do in men's sports, what would happen? I think last year with Caitlin Clark, that's one example, but such a great example. You always see it in the Olympics around these events, but that drumbeat that seems to be happening more and more now, I just think is amazing, amazing. In terms of IMG Academy, we have just a big focus on, it's not only just adding new sports, but the experience of girls. And so we created a women in sports committee. We have Lindsey Vaughn, we have Sloane Stevens, we have Danny Garcia, with this amazing mix of both women in the business of sport as well as professional athletes. And we really lasered in on, let's just go through every aspect of our girls' journey at IMG and how do we make it great? If it was good or really good, how do we make it great or excellent? And so we spent a ton of time on that here. We did a bunch of research last year with Positive Coaching Alliance that I want to turn the corner on this year on, it turns out that 75% of the coaches in youth sports are men, including the coaches for girls and young women. And it also turns out real research says boys and girls shouldn't be coached the same way. But if you go ask coaches, and I've done this, used to be my hobby, I'd walk around campus and ask the male coaches and the female coaches, how they coach the boys and the girls differently. And even at IMG, you get some of this, the old sort of coaches says, oh, it's all the same. We try to treat them the same, kind of thing. It's like that old mentality. If you ask a great woman coach who coaches girls and boys, they could write a book. On the nuance and the differences. And I think that's a big opportunity in youth sports in general, is really the pipeline of women coaches or appropriate education for the amazing male coaches out there that are coaching girls. And so we're doing things like this. And then we're looking at what new sports. The truth is, I think the emerging sports are great. We have big ones where is there a lot of participation in youth? And are there a lot of college roster spots? If the answer to both those questions are yes, those are usually pretty good opportunities for IMG. And until we've knocked all of those down, there's not a huge need to focus on more of the emerging sports. So volleyball's gone amazingly well as an example of that. Softball's off to a good start. We got a few more. I do love girls and women's flag football. Same time, there's not a ton of college opportunity there yet. So we're going to probably test camps, at IMG Academy and see how it goes. So anyway.
No, just to piggyback that, we were at the Bucks facility a week ago, and there were a couple thousand high school women flag football players out there, and the surge that's happening, and I think as these opportunities present themselves, if you build it, they will come, right? And so it's really neat to watch the groundswell start to happen. The Olympics now start to go ahead and connect it at the top, and then, with these emerging sports, start to navigate what that journey looks like instead of just inherit it and try and fit it in. So we'll definitely be on the lookout for that. Andrew, any other things on your side?
Yeah, I was going to say, Brent, we've touched on a ton of areas. Curious what you're paying attention to outside of your immediate sphere in sports. Are there any other trends or just big developments that you think are interesting that other people should have their eye on as well?
I think any reasonable executive right now needs to be paying attention to AI. And I'd say it's still a little bit early, but we're starting to test and experiment, around AI. I think it could have a lot of, amazing impact points, to increase the quality of our education, especially content development, content production. We're looking at there's a lot of interesting models out there of, sort of class, let's call it teacher assistants as AI. So I think if you project out 10 years into the future, AI will have a big impact, both on youth sports and academics, and for us, the education at the intersection. So so we're spending time there. I wish I had more sort of, here's how it's going to be. I think that we're still in the test and explore phase, but I do think it's important, and I spend a decent amount of time on it.
Yeah, it's a crazy state, the world's in right now, Brent. Maybe we'll have this conversation in a decade and there'll be robots that you guys will be doing some stuff with out there. Who knows? It's, but what a cool time to be building. What a cool time to take that legacy knowledge and implement and help shape what the future for, my 2-year-old daughter is going to look like in the next 10, 12, 15 years. And so, Brent, this has been absolutely insightful. It's great getting to know you and educating the market on IMG. As we continue to go ahead and expand your guys' offering, if someone listening wants to participate in a camp or learn more about IMG, where do you point them? How do they start to get involved?
Yeah, imgacademy.com. Everything's cool. right there. We've got all the social media, so you can follow us and on YouTube and Instagram and everything else. So just connect with our brand, and you'll see a mix of great content, real education for kids, but also, you'll get a sense of what our products are. And if it's right for your family, great.
Love it, man. Love it. Well, listen, for everything that you're doing, that IMG's doing, we're grateful for the perspective and the action that you guys are taking in the sporting ecosystem. All you listeners, if you guys like conversations like this, be sure to check out Profluent Sports, where we're bringing in founders, investors, executives across the sporting landscape and getting smarter and more educated on what's going on in sports so we can make better decisions as we shape the future. Brent, thank you so much again for your time, and look forward to doing this again soon.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen.
All right, cheers.